All right. Good morning and welcome back to Go for Launch. Today we have with us Zhilin Wang, Senior Applied Scientist at NVIDIA. Welcome, Zhilin.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
And we are so excited to learn more about you and what you do in your field. So, first, can you tell our audience what NVIDIA does and describe your role a little bit?
Sure. So NVIDIA started as a gaming chip company where we produce chips to accelerate gaming. So, when people first started playing games, graphics were, not really that great. So NVIDIA produced chips to accelerate how graphical frames are calculated on games. And that, enabled a whole new generation of games with, much better graphics to emerge. More recently, in the last 20 years or so, NVIDIA has invested a lot in supporting artificial intelligence infrastructure. So this means building chips, building servers, and all of that to actually accelerate how artificial intelligence is being trained and deployed. So I think most recently, for many of the audience out there, people might be familiar with things like ChatGPT, things like Claude. So all of this is supported by vast array of chips and infrastructure, and a good portion of that is built by NVIDIA. So as I mentioned earlier, a good amount of the chips that NVIDIA builds goes towards training and deploying artificial intelligence models. So as part of my role is to develop techniques for training these AI models, specifically models that process language and what is more commonly known as large language models. So specifically, my team converts a base language model. A base language model refers to a model that has been pre-trained on trillions of tokens into an instruction following or a chat model that you can chat with. So what you've heard of on ChatGPT or Llama or Claude, they all need to go through this process of post-training to allow them to support conversations.
Wow, that sounds really impressive and also complicated. Have there been any recent advancements that have been made specifically by your team?
Yes, our team developed quite a few technologies recently. I guess maybe one of the most recent breakthroughs by our team is to release the Llama 3.1 Nemotron 7dB model. So this is a model that we trained on top of Llama 3.1 7dB, and I think has thus far been downloaded on Hugging Face by more than 700,000 times. And especially what this model does is that it's more helpful to support user queries, and it gives kind of more elaborate explanations to user questions, often involving some form of reasoning. That's one recent progress by our team. So another progress by our team has been to release a set of data sets. So data sets are kind of things that are annotated to support model training, and we recently released a series of data sets called Helps there. And alongside, we also released a software called NemoLiner, which can allow people to make use of this software and make use of this data to train models.
That's all really interesting to learn, Zilin. And
Mhm.
as someone who's a little bit less familiar with a lot of the stuff that you've been touching on today, one question I have is if you can talk more or tell us what a token is. I think you mentioned a token when you were talking about training some of these models.
Yes, definitely. So I guess the easiest way to think about a token is it's kind of like a word. So in the earliest days of natural language processing, a token literally is just a word, right? Like a a word that is separated by spaces. But as this technology emerges, people found that using tokens are not necessarily words. So for example, when we say words like play and playing and played, so they all have like a common root word, right, which is play. So the tokenization process typically converts this like the word played into something like play and like ed in the past tense, so that all of them who share a common root would share something in common, and that allows models to learn more efficiently than if you were to just learn each word independently.
So, what inspired you to pursue a career in natural language processing? Was there an experience that inspired you?
All right. So I guess my journey into natural language processing isn't the most typical. I think most people typically what they do is that you take a CS degree and then you take some natural language processing classes, and then maybe you do some research or you do an internship, and then that's how you get there. But my journey has been slightly off, the well tracked. And what I did initially was that I was trying to build an education technology kind of website. And that website, what it does is that, it kind of like classifies YouTube videos into relevant syllabus subsections. So for example, if I were, a student today and I would need to learn something about, gases and, what is the ideal gas law, for example, that would classify, and if I know that I need that for my test tomorrow, I would go to my website and type in ideal gas law, and that would redirect you to a whole series of educational YouTube videos, past year exam questions, and some other formal guidance. And specifically, I think for the US audience, people are very familiar with Khan Academy, right? Because that's kind of like what people turn to for this kind of resources. But when I was reading it, I actually did my undergraduate in the UK, where people have a slightly different syllabus. I think people call it like A levels, and A levels as an exam requirement has the things that it tests for are a lot more specific. And so I guess in the US, every high school teach whatever they believe is helpful. There's not really too standardized curriculum. But in the UK, that there is a unified exam board, and people need to learn what is being tested for these exams. So we built this website specifically for that. And as we're building this website, we realized that the ability to match what users are looking for example, ideal gas law, to this like information in these videos and this stuff were increasingly important. And that's where I got started, because we needed some natural language processing techniques to see if like maybe this search phrase A is relevant to this document B. And that's where I got started, and I just delved in. I read books, I took online courses, and all of that just made me more and more excited about this field. And eventually I decided that this field itself is very interesting. It's a much more general enabling technology, and I decided to kind of do more. Eventually I took a master's in it.
Zhilin, you talked a little bit about your education in the UK. So we know that you got your undergraduate degree from Cambridge in education, learning, and psychology. And then you went on to do more of the natural language processing stuff. But does that educational background that you started off with, or your undergraduate degree, still play into the work that you do now with NVIDIA? And if so, can you talk a little bit more about how that educational background is contributing to your work in natural language processing?
Sure. Definitely. I think that education is still very relevant. And I think that's kind of the advantage of taking like a not so usual path into any career, right? You bring a fresh perspective into things that you do that your colleagues may or may not have. So I think one thing that really helped me that I learned from my course that is still super relevant today is figuring out like how to guide humans, right? Like when humans go through schooling, I think most people don't think about this. They just think like, okay, I read some books, my teacher teach me, and then I kind of like can do this well in this test. But some of the things I learned in education, psychology, and learning is that there's various theories that explain how people learn most effectively. So for example, I think very popularly in the US, right? you have things like extrinsic motivation, intrinsic motivation. How do you get people to be more intrinsically motivated to learn the subjects that they are interested in? And I learned a lot of this educational and psychology concepts that remain very relevant in today's kind of things that I do at NVIDIA. So one very cool application of what I learned recently is that as I mentioned earlier, we built a series of data sets called HelpSteer. So HelpSteer is actually short for helpfulness data set for kind of like this technique we call STRM. But I want to focus a little bit on helpfulness, right? Because when many of us go to services like ChatGPT today, we want the assistant there to be helpful to us. But what does it really mean to be helpful, right? So I guess most people before kind of in the NLP field before say 2021 or before ChatGPT got released, I think some of the things that most people focus on is that it's factually correct. So for example, if you ask what is the distance between the sun and the earth, right? And then it might answer something like, okay, it takes 8 minutes for for light to reach here, something like that, right? So it's like maybe 8 minutes times the speed of light. However, like when a person is actually in the real world, when a person is actually asking that question, a lot of times, especially if they're a student, they want to kind of they want a bit more information. So for example, they want to maybe for the AI to walk through the process of thinking about this. And for example, you can say that give more background information about the solar system. Maybe the Earth is how it's in the solar system. You briefly talk about other planets in the solar system, and then you can work out the thinking process about how to think about this problem. And so in this field, I think helpfulness and other kind of social science concepts, for example, empathy, for example, even like values, right? A common term that we commonly think about when we train these models is that we want to align this language models to human values. But I guess a question that not many people kind of delve too deep into is like what are these human values? And so for example, sometimes if we want them to be like, I think something that is also very popular nowadays is this chatting services. For example, when people role play to certain characters, I think most famously character AI. But what do you really mean by having a helpful character? Like what does that mean, right? So for example, I guess part of that might mean that it provides emotional comfort. Like when a person is feeling sad, maybe you want some words of encouragement from them. So I guess a lot of these implicit concepts and background really helps me to get a different perspective on doing this model training, where I have some ideas about how to you actually train models towards being helpful and supportive to humans. But that being said, right, I still needed to learn a whole bunch of technical skills, writing code, doing kind of large scale training, that complements my knowledge learning undergraduate.
Yeah, I think, like you said, a lot of us probably don't really think about what are those human values. We sort of know that AI is getting at that, or that it's somehow related to that. But I personally, think about coding and programming and computer science when I think about AI and large language models. So it's really interesting to hear how your background in education, psychology, and learning has played into what you do now.
Yeah, and in addition to your bachelor's at Cambridge and also your master's at UW, your education journey has included a lot of online courses, including from Stanford, MIT, Imperial College London. How has this diverse academic experience shaped and prepared you for what you do today?
I think that's a great question. So I started taking online courses right about after high school. So, back then, I had some ideas about, building an educational tech website. So, for example, the website I mentioned to you earlier. And, building a website is no easy feat, right? It's like back then, there's, I didn't know anything about coding, and, it just looked so complex, but it's something that I decided I want to learn. So, I used some ads, but alongside, I also used some online courses, such as the one that you mentioned. I think my first course, my first couple of courses I took was a intro to CS class from MIT, and also intro to machine learning class from, I think, Stanford. And those kind of really give me a good kind of like insight into like what really is like, CS, right? How do you kind of tackle problems, decompose problems into ways that you can use a computer to solve, and also what kind of problems you can ask machine learning algorithms to solve, rather than using a hard coded kind of like problem like software approach. And I think that really complemented my education in education psychology. So I guess a background is that in the UK, colleges are a lot more structured in the sense that you kind of enroll into a major, and all of your classes needs to be related to that major. So I guess in the US, where it's more kind of like credit space, you take most of the classes in your major, but especially in the early years, you explore more variety of courses. I think those those are similar to what I did, except that I couldn't do that in the UK, and hence I opt to use online classes to complement some of my learning.
That's pretty very dedicated of you to do that kind of thing. I know it's so easy to get wrapped up in how much work there already is. If you told me that I was going to take like additional online classes on top of my degree and everything else that I was going on or that had going on, I would say no. Like, I can't add any more to this. If I needed to know it, they would put it in my degree.
Yeah. So I guess like I guess I want to share this for the audience. I feel like something that's very important in kind of like learning this. I personally don't overly subscribe to the model of like kind of learning things just in case you need it later on. I feel like that kind of like you need an incredible amount of motivation, especially if you're doing something else, like doing formal degree or like doing work. If you want to pursue like some learning, I think you would ideally have a problem or skill you want to learn for a goal in mind. And that kind of makes it a lot easier, right? Because you're not doing it just because you should be doing it. I think for if you are kind of like doing like maybe a 1 week course, I think that like if it's just interesting, you can get it through. But if you're doing like a 15-week course, in the middle, especially when things get busy and hectic, as things always get, right? You really need a good reason for either interest or something you want to build to get you through that process of taking that course. Yeah. Or really whatever you want to do, right? Like like having a reason for like having a why for what you want to do is like very, very important in my mind.
And when it comes to any university or any academic institute that you attend to, whether you're taking courses or apprenticeships, there's usually the concept in regards to internships, which we're all familiar with. We had to do internships here and there. Within your journey, you've interned at Amazon Alexa AI Knowledge. How was that experience? And even then, how was like the application process? Was it competitive? And can you give any advice for others who may want to pursue this opportunity?
Okay, so maybe I can first talk a little bit about what Amazon Alexa AI Knowledge is, and then I can share my experience, and then finally, I share a little bit of my experience applying for it. So Amazon Alexa AI Knowledge is in one of the services that power Amazon Alexa. So Alexa, I guess, is a service similar to Siri, where you have this device, and then you can ask Amazon Alexa to do all kinds of things, including ordering for you something on Alexa, playing some music, turning off your lights, things like this. Specifically, the AI, the knowledge part of it actually caters to answering knowledge intensive questions. So what knowledge intensive questions means is like, for example, if I were to ask who was who won the World Cup in 2008, right? So that would require I think nowadays if you ask ChatGPT, that could be an LLM generated answer right away. But this was in 2021 when LLMs like ChatGPT weren't available, right? So back then there were a couple of approaches to do it, and one of the most popular ways to do it was to kind of search it a knowledge graph, where you can decompose this query about who won the World Cup in like 2008 to like winner World Cup 2008, things like atomic parts, and then you kind of search up in a graph where you have this knowledge curated. Okay, so that's about Amazon Alexa AI knowledge. So I think I really enjoyed that internship and I learned a lot, right? So before this internship, I did, I think, 2 other internships relating to technology and programming. But this was my first internship in a big tech company, right? Or I guess what you call like the FANGs or the Magnificent Seven, like, or whatever you say, call them like nowadays. So I guess one thing I really learned from this internship that I didn't learn from other internships is how to write good software, right? So I started out mostly as a kind of, I took some online courses and I built my own like website, right? So that's kind of like, you can call it self-taught or just, yeah, but I guess a disadvantage of doing that is that I didn't know what are kind of some of the established software practices, right? So how do you write your code in a way that encourages collaboration where other people see your code? So before this, most of the time when I write code, I just kind of like write code, make sure it works, and then deploy it onto the website, right? Whereas this time around, one thing I learned a lot from my amazing manager and mentors at Amazon was that when we start a project, we kind of have to like plan for it properly, think about the scope of the software, and then even as we write it, we need to make sure that it's structured properly. So for example, one of the concepts is like modular programming, right? You want to, for each of your parts of the software to be so independent, so that as you upgrade each of those components, the other components don't just break. And going through a lot of peer review by my team and my mentor especially, I think that was great learning experience, and it taught me how to write code in a more clear, professional, and easier to read manner that previously wasn't something that I was overly familiar with. Going back to the application process, I think for bigger tech companies, typically it's a very standardized process. So you first have some initial like technical screens. So by these technical screens, I mean like solving some computer science problems. I guess a lot of people will know this as kind of leak code problems. And then afterwards, you go through a final round of interviews where you essentially talk to a couple more people, especially those who might be working in a team that you are close to the team that you'll be working in, and you kind of you solve more technical problems, and also you answer some behavioral questions. So for example, that assesses how well you likely work in a team. What are your inclinations and working styles, for example. So yeah, I would say that it was definitely like challenging. Like it wasn't my first, like I didn't get in my first application. I had to apply a couple of times, and and it just worked out, right? Like when I first submitted my initial applications, I was like the process stopped at various points, and I kind of had to learn a little bit about what went wrong and kind of like sharpen my skills for the next set of interviews. And for some of the audience out there who might be applying for internships, I think it's important to kind of have some perspective, like, because I guess nowadays, like, internships are getting more and more competitive. Like, you might not get it in your first application, and that's completely fine, right? Just do more preparation, understand what didn't work, and try more, right? It's like start early, definitely start early, and so that you give yourself a couple more chances to kind of like really try out, and just take it one step at a time, right? Learn from the experience, and try to learn for some role. And I think that's generally, I think, a process that people, I think, both in and outside of tech will go through, and it's important not to be overly discouraged by some initial rejections, because that's really what everyone goes through.
And you kind of already answered this question already, but how, when it comes to internships, can you describe like the importance of internships in general, whether it's what you're doing, or even someone outside this field and everything? Because it seems like while internships what comes to college students may seem like, oh man, I'm working for free, like I'm not even getting paid that much, or if I am, it's like minimum wage. And we all don't want to have that feeling, like we feel like we're going backwards for opportunities.
Yeah.
But in this case for you, it was a step forward. Can you explain in regards to the importance of pursuing internships in general?
Yes. Okay, so before I kind of get started on kind of the other benefits, I want to clarify a little bit. I think at many of these big tech companies, like, internships are paid, and generally they're paid pretty well. So certainly, like, my internship at Amazon, was being paid like way better than any of my previous internships. And so for the audience who might think that internship are kind of unpaid, a lot of these big tech companies do pay very handsomely. Okay, so going past the financial part, because I don't want, I think a lot of people, like, get deterred by the fact that they don't get paid. And for many people who have other life commitments, they can't get unpaid. So I want to put it out there that these internships often come with a good pay and a stipend. So you shouldn't be deterred if you think you have to work for free. That being said, right, I guess especially in the US, there is a lot of unpaid internships in different sectors. I think even in smaller tech companies, or some other industries, it is possible that people can go to internship and not get paid. And I think when thinking about this, like, for example, if someone is thinking about, say, doing an unpaid internship in their future industry of choice, versus for example, going to McDonald's or going to Starbucks for, like, like, I don't know, like a waitressing or cashier job. I think it's also important to bear in mind that there are some certain benefits of doing like some getting some experience in industry of your choice, especially if you do want to pursue this in the longer term, right? So I think I think it's, so for example, I think many of this like industries, when you first get in, it's kind of much harder for you to get a full-time job if you didn't have an internship. I think it really varies by industry, and I don't know enough about other industries, but I want to talk a little bit about computer science, right? So I think the way to think about this is like, so internships are generally about 3 months, and during that 3 months, companies, it essentially is a way for companies to identify future employees that they don't have a good track record of working, and they have some confidence in that you'll be able to produce work better than someone who might not have gone through this experience. And in that perspective, I think is a way for companies to kind of both assess and train you to prepare you for the job. And a lot of this, especially for software engineering jobs, a lot of the skills are highly transferable, right? So I guess if you go to one software engineering company A and you go to decide to, for example, if you want to do an internship at company A, but you eventually want to land another job at company B, a lot of the skills are highly transferable. And having some internship experience at one of these companies would very much prepare you for a job at another company. So I guess overall, I would highly encourage internships. And if you have certain financial constraints, then maybe just apply for the ones that pay. But definitely don't be deterred to do an internship. And I guess especially in the US, I think it's very common for people to do internships, not just in summer where school is not happening, but some companies also open up opportunities in other semesters and all quarters. So I think it's important to learn some of these skills, especially for sectors such as technology or computer science. I think it's super valuable. It essentially it taught me a lot. And I think I think a lot of people might think that internships are not fun. I think that's quite the contrary to the experience that I had. It was super fun. I learned a lot, worked with great people, and had a lot of fun.
That's awesome. I've had a few internships myself in different kind of subfields of my main field and everything like that. And I think the most fun internship I ever had actually deterred me from the path I thought I was going to take. I absolutely enjoyed and loved the internship, but after 3 months, I kind of sat there it was a fantastic experience, super happy that I had it. But I don't think I want to do this for the rest of my life. Did you have any kind of similar things throughout your path, whether it was internships or something that kind of switched you tracks, or maybe wasn't exactly what you were expecting?
I think that's a great question, right? So I'm currently working in industry jobs, but so I don't have any internship experience that shaped me like this. But so prior to kind of I think at the start of doing my master's, I was really set on doing a PhD. So I guess for some of our audience who might be considering PhDs, I think I do want to share this perspective. I kind of did my master's. I did a lot of research projects during my master's, and I think I learned a lot. But I eventually decided that was not going to be a path that works for me. And I think I think the interesting thing I learned was, because the fact that I did kind of a research assistantship and also internships before that, I get to compare different tracks, right? So as MacKenzie was previously saying, it's okay if you do different internships and you decide you don't want to go down one path, because I think the important thing is that you gain more information and you learn more about yourself in the process. And that kind of helps you to pick what's the next step, right? Because I guess the economy is always changing, especially with AI. What might be, a good choice nowadays might not be a good choice, maybe 5-10 years down the road. So by learning more about yourself during this process and what you're most suited for, I think that's a good outcome. And, regardless of whether you decide to eventually pursue this path. Because I think a lot of people, when before going to an internship or going to a job, I think they often have very highly idealized versions of kind of what people do. So definitely for me, before I started my internship, I would just go to YouTube and search what do people like Amazon or some of the other big tech do in a day in the life of, right? And often you paint a picture of it's very glamorous, right? You go into office, you grab a cup of coffee and then you grab lunch, and then it doesn't seem like they do any work. But I mean, it's just because they aren't allowed to film the type of work that they actually do, right? Because that wouldn't be super engaging for the audience. But actually, working as a software engineer does involve some interesting kind of like benefits, but it also comes with some challenges, right? So for example, many of the problems that you solve, are kind of hard, and you must be okay with not being able to get it right on the first time. Yeah, because I think a lot of people, like I think the fact that when you code, people think of it as wow, I want to code a website, or I want to code an app, right? I just in one day, or I just finish it. But in reality, it often doesn't happen like that. You go through kind of like even in the planning stage, you go through a lot of review, and you get a lot of feedback. And when you write code, sometimes they break, and you have to fix them. And I guess for people who have done a lot of this programming stuff, sometimes debugging is like the worst nightmare you might have, right? And you literally might you might spend like I don't know an hour coding up this thing, and you might spend the next week debugging it because you have absolutely no idea why it breaks. So I think the experience of having to go through that, like as a sample 3-month process, before you kind of step into that role, and knowing whether you're someone who is happy to do that, for many years going forward, right? I think that's a great lesson to kind of learn. And if you eventually decide that that's not something for me, like for example, after I tried research, and eventually realized that I wasn't going to commit myself to doing like 5 years of PhD research, I think that's completely fine, right? You gain valuable experience to learn about yourself, and then you use that knowledge to kind of like bring you to your next step in your career, right? And for me, that was kind of like kind of some applied research job at NVIDIA, which kind of greatly used my skills developed during my research assistantships. And I think that's great, right? I wasn't expecting to get this job, but life takes you somewhere that you weren't expecting, right? And it's important to kind of like make use of the skills you learned previously.
Yeah, it's been super fascinating to hear your perspective and your take on internships. A lot of the stuff you mentioned has taken me years and years and multiple internships to learn. So I hope our listeners are taking notes. We've got some excellent advice in those last few minutes. And now shifting gears a little bit, beyond your internship and educational stuff into the work you do now on NVIDIA, we know that some of your recent work has focused on humanizing AI by analyzing social signals and the nuances of natural language. So I'm wondering if you think there would ever be a day where AI chatbots are indistinguishable from humans, or where they might even surpass a human's ability to detect these kinds of social signals.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So whether like human chatbots can be indistinguishable from humans, I think first of all, I think it depends on the type of conversations, but in many settings, so in CS we have this thing called the Turing test. Basically, if you give 2 responses, and then you ask people to identify which one is the chatbot and which one is the human written, I think a few papers I've seen suggest that people have essentially aren't able to effectively distinguish between this chatbots in general settings, right? Like question answering. But I guess the question is more nuanced than that, in the sense that it really depends on the type of task you're trying to get it to do, right? So asking it for a joke versus asking it to solve some really really hard math questions. I think those are different types of task difficulty. And yeah, I think in some sectors, like solving really really hard math questions is something that like AI models still are kind of lacking on, and kind of like they're not reaching human expert level yet, right? So I just want to kind of put it out there, but especially in regards to social signals, I think it also depends. Okay, so the reason why I say it depends, right, is because so before we go to like AI models, right, let's talk about more kind of general technology, right? So for example, Google search, like YouTube recommendations, and even TikTok recommendations. I would say that they kind of like develop, a good algorithm to kind of understand and predict what kind of videos or what kind of content you like. And I would even say that, that's like if you ask your friend to recommend you YouTube videos or TikTok or whatever, I'm not sure if they can do a better job than the algorithm can do for you, because you spend so much time interacting with these services and they get to know you, your interests, your things that that you like, a lot better than some of your friends can do. So just in those kind of settings, I do think technology has this advantage of extracting some signals from humans, even better than other humans. So when it comes to especially about social signals, I think there's also a wide spectrum of like social signals as well. So I want to give like one specific example about what's like most helpful, because I think I wrote a paper, I think 3-4 years ago, on how do you kind of like identify which Reddit so if someone posts a question on Reddit, right, and people can comment below for to try to help, and so sometimes this is in highly settings where people really need advice from other people, and people can comment, and there's a way like, and the original poster can actually there's a mechanism in that specific subreddit to identify which comment was really helpful. And I trained a model to kind of like predict that, which comment is the most helpful, and see if they can extrapolate to some other settings. And I think back then, I don't think it reached human performance. So this was 3-4 years ago. If you were to ask me whether LLMs today can capture some of the social signals better, I think depending on like social signal. So for example, I think a very well established task in natural language processing is emotion detection. So given, say, I don't know, like 6 basic emotions, can you predict what is in this? That this is a highly established task, and on many benchmarks, they have surpassed like the average human. On the other hand, I think for some of the more like complex social signals, for example, empathy, for example, like theory of mind, they might be harder. But I don't think I've seen any paper that claims either that LLMs are better at this or vice versa. Because first of all, I think it's important for us to establish really robust evaluations on this. And so far I haven't seen, at least to the best of my knowledge, I'm not aware of them. And that being said, right, so there's a wide spectrum of social signals, and I think the trend that I do very clearly see is that for things that we are able to measure, we're getting better year by year, and some of them has surpassed human level. And even for things that maybe we haven't surpassed human level, we're getting there. And yeah, I think gradually, someday maybe we'll reach there.
That's really like an interesting perspective to hear from, and especially from someone who's working in this, it's really cool to hear where you think how you think this has evolved and where you think it might be going. And sort of follow up I have to that is whether you think the type of progress that's been made so far, we talked sort of generally about tech and then AI, large language models. Do you think that sort of progress would eventually extend into humanoid robotics?
Okay, sure. Let me answer your first question about where it's going. I think definitely. So a trend I see like this year, like since OpenAI 01 came out, is that the people are focusing a lot more on reasoning, like inference type reasoning. By that, what I mean is that rather than just asking a chatbot to answer a question right as you ask it to, you ask it to think for a bit, and then it thinks for a bit, and then it gives you a more considered answer. So that is what's happening for general LLMs. as for social signals, I think I do get the sense that there are many research groups that are kind of like interested in this and also trying to work towards this. Yeah, but I still do feel like interest in this area is slightly less than, some of the math reasoning. And I think a lot of this is about background, right? So many of the researchers, established CS researchers, they kind of did their undergraduate education in, say, math or computer science or even physics. And then they go on to do like some form of like machine learning PhD. And, a lot of times these people are really fascinated by math problems and, these problems, right? So, yeah, so naturally, because people like many ML researchers like it, like these areas get a lot of attention. On the other hand, if you think about some of the social signals, to make progress, you really need people to be interested in both like the social signals themselves and also machine learning. You have a large group of people who work in psychology and education who are really great. I really enjoy their work. But they might not know how to apply what they learned into like improving large language models. So the very fact that you need an intersectional group of like talent working on this means that naturally it's going to be like that there's going to be fewer people working on it. And if there's fewer people going to be working on it, I think the progress, there will still be progress. I've seen this like, every year when I read new papers, I'm always astounded by what's happening. But it doesn't mean that, it's not as kind of like visible or and a lot of times it's also very hard to measure some of this, right? Like what does it really mean for something as simple as for LLM to have empathy, right? Like there's a lot of ways to measure empathy, and the progress towards that is like more ambiguous compared to can LLM solve math problems of this difficulty, because there's an objective right answer and you know whether it's right or wrong. Whereas like even for humans it's kind of hard, right? Like is this like chatbot being empathetic at this time? Yeah. So okay, to our second question about humanoid robotics, I think it's hard. Okay, so I want to kind of like break this down into two parts, right? Like humanoid and robotics. Okay, maybe that's not a good way to think about it. So I want to kind of like make the challenges into two parts, right? Like the robotics part of it. I think the robotics part of it, many people are chipping away the problem. So like building human like structures. I think there's this one from Tesla. There's this one from humanoid that I think they claim to work with OpenAI services. And also I think NVIDIA itself also has some humanoid robotics called Groot. So I think people are making great progress on the like basic, how do you get it to move, how do you get it to follow instructions, like for example, if you see like some toast, can you kind of put some bread into the toaster and get it out, like things like this basic commands. I guess another part of this very important like humanoid robotics is that the kind of more soft side of it, right? So if like I mean, this is just I'm not sure if this will ever happen, but like if someday if it happens, like in science fiction, where we kind of live alongside humanoid robots that kind of like have human shape, but can you actually interact with them in a way that you would interact with another human? I think right now the general trend that I'm seeing is that people are not really looking towards such robots. I think, yeah, people are more looking for robots that can replace humans in tasks that you don't want humans to do. So I guess most recently I heard there's a very bad case of like forest fires in like Los Angeles area, and many people are saying, yeah, why don't we just send these humanoid robots to go like put out the fires? I think to me, generally, it seems like a trend that many companies are building these robots to do real life tasks. I think the side about how do you build robots that can kind of be like humans in detecting social signals, and also kind of, I think this is hard. Also, I think I'm not sure. It kind of also depends on like how much the public is willing to like use this, like, because it kind of sounds like science fiction, and some people, like people especially who maybe watch Black Mirror, they might think that it's
It's a
it
little
might not be a
scary.
good idea. Yeah. So yeah. However, so my thinking is that, and also I've done this work called humanoid agents, I think 1 year ago. And what we try to do is that we try to, like, our goal is not to kind of build this humanoid robots, right? Because I think that's still like many, many years ago. But we do try to use how humans think, in terms of both, like, how we think about problem solving, but also how we react to our emotions and our basic needs. For example, like when we're hungry, right, we say a different thing. When we're angry, we say a different thing than we are when we feel calm. So how do you use this kind of like more human-like information processing to influence how large language models react? And yeah, I think it's a start. But yeah, it's more of like, I think, like, I guess the angle that we are approaching it from is more from like the side of simulation, where we try to simulate and use these simulations to do to find out interesting insights about like human psychology and sociology trends. But whether or not that would translate, I think it's very unlikely that would translate into like real world, like humanoid robotics in the form. But yeah, we'll see. Like,
Yeah, I guess we'll see where things go. And I'm curious for you personally, what you're most excited to see, or what about the future of some of the stuff we've talked about, like AI, natural language processing, deep learning. What excites you the most? What are you most looking forward to?
Yeah, I guess something that I'm really interested in, like in the immediate future, is how this LLMs can be personalized for different people. So right now, I guess when we see, for example, ChatGPT or many of the other services, a lot of what's powering them is just kind of a language model, right? And maybe a couple of like supporting systems. But as we go kind of like forward, I feel like different people have different like preferences. And just like how today, when we go to Google or YouTube, it's highly personalized towards our interests, right? So whether we can get the same level of personalization in LMs, I think that would be great. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's something that for them to be more useful, I do think that having more personalization would be great. That's something I'm looking forward to.
How do you see, or what advice do you have for young professionals who might want to help contribute to these advancements? For instance, people who would be entering your field when there's more focus on these type of things.
Yeah, I guess the first, I guess the easiest path to do it is to do some, like, go to some classes, right? Take some basic NLP classes, because I guess a lot of this is like, there is still some technical knowledge you have to know in order to understand what's going on. And once you do that, I think the next step is to maybe consider doing some internships or doing some research assistantships. Maybe, just go to LinkedIn, email some like folks, or if you're at a college, you can go talk to or email some professors. And any experience is good, right? Because it gets you to like learn about the field better. And yeah, and then afterwards you can maybe consider pursuing a career in this direction. I think that would be great.
Speaking of education and career, when looking back on your path through both of those, what would you say has been the most valuable factor for getting you to where you are today?
Yeah, I think it's hard to think about one singular factor, but I guess one thing that is very useful for me is to kind of like have a reason to be motivated. by this. And something that really motivates me is to kind of build technology that helps humanity. As cliche as it sounds, but when I was building that tech website, I do believe that was the best way to help students learn. And even today when I'm working on LLM, I still do believe that LLMs can improve human lives in many ways, including education. Like I can't believe how many people are using ChatGPT for their learning nowadays, and I think it's a great advancement. So I guess one thing that I discovered, maybe similar to so the journey can have setbacks during the process, right? Like maybe you apply for an internship that you really want, you didn't get it, or you do this research and it doesn't turn out well. So I think the important thing is to kind of figure out what you're really passionate about. I'm not sure if passion is the right word, but figure out something that really motivates you. Like you need to know that preferably, and then when things get hard, just think about it, right? And maybe it will help you to get through those tough times. Yeah, because I don't think anyone's career is smooth sailing, and if it's overly smooth sailing, you're probably not giving yourself enough, not putting ourselves for what it can be. So so just prepare for difficulty, and make sure understand yourself better through this process. And it's also not a straight path. Like people go into different things. When I first started, I thought I was maybe going to become a teacher, right? And then I tried it. It didn't seem like it had the amount of impact that I really wanted to make, because I wanted to improve education for a large number of people. So just try it, and let your your inner voice guide you. Also, that's something that I really think is important.
Was there anything else that has you that you're curious about, like outside of what you do or within what you do?
So I guess something I've been recently doing is that I've been starting to read books on psychology. So I think when I was an undergrad, I read a lot of books on it. But as I in my career, generally when things get busy, when I focus a lot on coding and all that, it's easy to just brush aside reading stuff. But something that I'm recently curious about is to pick up some of the books that I've wanted to read but not had the time to read, and just read them.
Yeah, well, we are so happy to have had you here today, Zhilin. We've learned so much from your educational background to all of the different steps you've taken along your career. And it's been super fascinating to hear more about the type of work that you're doing now at NVIDIA, and just sort of in general what's going on in this field. I personally have found it very enlightening. I really appreciate, and we all really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today and share all of the advice and all of the perspective that you did with our listeners. So just one more big thank you, and we hope to talk to you again soon.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right. Bye, everyone.